to have the new people here. So welcome to the June 15th meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission.
Just lost me.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just lost the. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Right.
Now here's Zach. It's Cynthia. Sorry.
Okay, great. Gotcha. So the purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the City Administrator in matters affecting renters in our city. The Ann Arbor Renters Commission is made up of voting members who are appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council. We have some new members joining us today. 2 non-voting City Council liaisons, Councilmember Redina and Councilmember Harrison, and 1 non-voting liaison to the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. I believe that position is still vacant. It's from HHSIB, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, to us. And then there's 2 non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, and a non-voting representative from the University of Michigan Student Legal Services, Gail Rosen, who can't be here tonight. So to speak during any of the public comment opportunities, you will be able to speak through the webinar link or by phone. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247, meeting ID 935-8080-1941. That's 935-8080-1941. To be called on to speak, callers must press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if you're calling through the web link. And the web link is a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. That's a capital R, C, and M. So renters commission meeting. And you'll be called upon by city staff, and you will have 3 minutes to make your public comment. And you will be reminded when there's 30 seconds left of your comment as well. So moving on to roll call, that's item number 2. As we go through the roll call, since a lot of us don't know, at least the new members and vice versa, I think it'd be good if we, first of all, you have to say where you're calling from, say your name, and if you could give a brief introduction. All those, you can mention if you were just appointed, or if you hold one of those positions, the specific positions like I mentioned, or if you're representing a landlord perspective, for example, or a tenant perspective. So one more time, that's where you're calling from, introduce yourself, and what your perspective is here. So I'll go down the list. Commissioner Chen is not here. Commissioner Peterson.
Hey folks, Lucy calling from Ann Arbor. Vice chair of this commission, and I'm a graduate student at University of Michigan, if we're giving quick intros.
Welcome. Commissioner Kelly.
Hello, I'm here calling from Ann Arbor, just a general commission member. My background is in public health. I'm a public health professional.
Welcome. Commissioner Droppelman.
Hi, I'm Bob Droppelman. I am one of the non-voting landlord representatives. I am a small, very small landlord in terms of units rented, and I also work in IT.
Welcome. Commissioner Else, who is absent today. Commissioner Jordan Else is the other landlord representative on the commission. Oh yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Just wanted to also say that I'm calling from Ann Arbor.
I recognized your usual spots.
The background.
Thank you for saying it. Yeah. Commissioner Lowe's.
Hi, Jeff Lowe's. I am a commission member. I'm a high school teacher, and I live in Ann Arbor.
Welcome, Jeff. Commissioner Tibbetts.
Hello, I'm Jamie. I'm calling in from Ann Arbor. My background is in social work, and I am a current graduate student at the School of Social Work.
Welcome, Jamie. Commissioner Rosen gets Gail Rosen. That's the representative from U of M Student Legal Services. She can't be here tonight. Cross it off. And then Commissioner Ratcliffe.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Ratcliffe. Oh, sorry, I'm Rosanita. And I'm calling in from Ann Arbor. My background is in education and in disability justice and social services.
Welcome, Rosanita. We're very, very happy to have you here. Commissioner Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Arthur Thomas. I'm calling from Ypsilanti. I'm currently temporarily off work from the city of Ann Arbor's Park and Recreation. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I love Parks and Rec, so that's awesome. Commissioner Pitts. Well, you are muted. We still can't hear you, actually. There you go.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
I do.
Yes. Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. My name is Kim. I'm from Ann Arbor. Absolutely new. So just trying to get the feel of things right now. I guess I represent for the residents, the housing. I live in housing. And I do housekeeping. Done that for a few years. Kind of transitioning into gardening now. So I'm a big gardener for the property that I live on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. And do you go by Kim?
I like Kimberly.
Kimberly. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I think we started off, we had a conversation in the very beginning of the commission about whether we're going to call each other Commissioner so-and-so, or if we should use first names. And I think everyone was okay with first names, but if you do prefer to be referred to by your title, just let me know. And we'll try our best to do that. It's totally fine. Commissioner Good.
Hi, I'm calling in from Ann Arbor. I have a background, this is my first meeting. I have a background in nonprofit work and did a handful of years as a tenant advocate.
Welcome. Okay, Councilmember Redina.
Hi, everybody. Apologize for being late. I was coming from another community event with Councilmember Harrison. I am Councilmember Redina, one of the council liaisons to the Renters Commission. Travis is fine. And I represent the 3rd Ward on council, which is kind of from campus out to Southeast Ann Arbor. And welcome to our new commissioners. I'm so excited for all of you to join us and participate in the conversation and the dialogue. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Councilmember Harrison, I think I saw you in a car, so if you're not able to talk right now, that's okay. We can come back later.
I can, no, it's okay. I am the passenger in the car coming back from an event that I was at with Councilmember Redina. So hello, I'm calling in from Ann Arbor. I'll be on camera soon. I'll be home shortly. I represent the 1st Ward, and really, really excited to see our new commissioners tonight. I love the diversity. We're off to a good start here, so that's great, and welcome to our new commissioners. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I second all that. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Zachariah. I'm currently the chair. I'm also just a tenant in town. I live next to the VA hospital, and so I'm obviously I'm representing a tenant perspective. I work as a research assistant at the Rogel Cancer Center, but obviously I'm quite involved with the renters issues in the city. I look forward to working with all of you. And before we begin, I see that, yeah, we would just go right to the approval of the agenda next. But before we begin, I just want to say a few things. I think if for the people who are new, you can always ask questions. I might not necessarily know the answer to it, but I will defer to Travis or to Kristen, and they will probably know the answer. So it's always okay to ask questions. That's not just for the new people, it's for everybody. It's okay to not know who's voting and who's not at first. You know, we're all learning here. And if ever a situation arises where you feel like you're not sure about, you feel like a discussion was a bit impolite, or you weren't happy with how somebody would talk to you or whatever, we got to figure these things out. So you can always email me about anything with questions, with any concerns, conflicts, whatever. You have my email, you have my phone number, text me, call me, anything, and we'll figure it out. So I want to make you all feel as welcome as possible. Okay.
Thank you.
And
Of course.
can I also just note, I know also Cynthia may have all of the answers as well. I know that she talked to several of you, the new folks, as you were thinking about joining. So she is also a wealth of knowledge.
Yes.
I second that. Absolutely. So we move on to the approval of the agenda. Now, just as a reminder, and for those of you who weren't here at our last meeting in May, we weren't able to meet a quorum. So in order to host these meetings, we have to have at least 6 voting members present. If we don't have that, then we can't hold an official meeting, which means we can't make decisions on behalf as the commission. And another thing to mention before we get started here is that these meetings are broadcast on CTN. So that means that people can access them online or on TV. I think it's still public access TV. Okay, great. Great. So just be aware that people can see you, and there are spectators on right now, attendees. So at our last meeting, we didn't meet quorum, so we weren't able to hold an official meeting. So when we start going to like the approval of minutes, which is item number 5, we will be not approving last meeting because we didn't really have it like for May, but the one before for April. So let's get in. The first one is approval of the agenda, item 4. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda before us?
So moved.
Okay, I saw Rosanita first, so moved by Rosanita. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, seconded. All right, so we have a motion to approve the agenda. Before we go on vote on the agenda, I have a few suggestions for the commission. It's up to all of you, but I think it would be good if we postponed a couple items here to our next meeting, since our agenda is getting a bit long here. Let's see, 7-D and 7-E. Those are 2 things here. It's liaison to we would be choosing a liaison to HHSIB, which is another city board. And the second one, officer elections. It's where we elect the chair and the vice chair. I think we should wait 1 more month so our new members feel comfortable and they know the commission, and if they want to run for those positions, they'd be able to do so. So if anyone is interested in postponing those 2 things, you could make a motion now.
I'll make a motion that we delay that until next time.
Okay, motion by Arthur. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Second by Jamie. Okay, so now we'll vote on postponing those things, moving those off of our agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed to postponing say nay. Okay, with that, the agenda is amended. So now we have this amended agenda before us. Now we vote on whether or not we adopt this as our agenda. Sorry for all these steps here, but it's important, I've been assured. So all those in favor of adopting the amended agenda, say aye.
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 Okay, all those opposed, say nay. Okay, so we have our amended agenda before us. It's the same as the one you received, just minus 7-D and 7-E. Okay, next we can move on to, are there any questions about what just happened there before we move on?
No.
Nope.
Great, okay. Now we can move on to approval of minutes. That's item 5. This is approval for April's minutes. If that's correct, yes. So do we have a motion to approve the last official meeting's minutes?
I have a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us who are new, should we abstain from voting on the approval of those minutes?
It's a good question. I don't think you need to abstain. I believe you can vote on that, but
Okay.
yeah, you can.
This has come up in other meetings. It's always a little awkward because you haven't, but you can always check them for like any clear errors or things like that. You would be allowed to vote on them. Often folks who weren't here don't move or second them just because they don't feel comfortable with it, but you can vote on them. Yes.
Thank you.
I will motion to approve.
Thank you, Jeff. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Arthur. Great. All those in favor of approving last meeting's minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, with that, we approved our last meeting's minutes for April. Now we get to item 6, which is our first general public comment session. Kristen, would you like to lead that?
Public comment can be made by phone by calling 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099. Entering meeting ID 935-8080-1941. For anyone who is attending the Zoom meeting, you can use the raise hand feature to raise your hand to be called on to speak, and anyone who has called in can press *9 to raise your hand. You'll be called on to speak, and you can address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes. Give it just a moment in case anyone wants to raise their hand. I know with ND7 if you do.
Okay, so we can move on to item 7. And that's all of our business, the things we have to discuss, the decisions we have to make. We'll start with 7-A, which is a presentation from the Human Rights Commission, which is another commission in the city government. I'll recognize Leslie.
Hello. Very nice to be here. And I am here with Linda Winkler. And the two of us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Yes. We're here because we see the potential of partnership. We do things very similarly. We're going to talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it. And hopefully you will also see opportunities. And when opportunities come, we will have a bond already. And that's why we're here. So let me begin. Can you share? I'll share my screen, I guess is what I'm doing. From beginning. Can you see it?
No.
Not yet.
Good, because can't. Somebody has to say share screen, and I haven't done that, and I don't know. I don't have an opportunity to do that.
Oh.
You have me set as a co-host, so you should be able to share.
I don't.
Is the share screen with the arrows?
Okay.
Oh, cool.
I don't see any opportunity to do that. Let me go back to the Zoom. Aha, here it is. Okay. Now can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. That's just luck. Okay, the Human Rights Commission. One of the things that you should know about us is that we have, for years, done very little work with rentals and housing. And all of a sudden, from about 2021, 2021, we have gotten a lot of complaints. And we are learning. Okay. Human rights protections are at every level of government, as I'm sure you know. For housing at the federal level, there is the Fair Housing Act. There is, and there are HUD rules. In the state, we've got Elliott Larson, civil rights law. In the city, we have a number of ordinances that have to do with civil rights. The Ann Arbor non-discrimination ordinance is one of those. It's our main ordinance, and we are responsible for enforcing that ordinance. The ordinance establishes 26 protected classes, starting with age and going all the way to weight in alphabetical order. The ones that are highlighted in blue are ones that are special to the Ann Arbor Human Rights, to the city of Ann Arbor. Age, arrest record, color, disability, for example, all these that are just white, are also protected at the state level by Elliott Larson. Educational association, ethnicity, family responsibilities, government ID cards, etc. The ones that are in blue are just available because they're in the Ann Arbor ordinance. We enforce all violations of all of these. In housing practices, in public accommodations, in employment practices, and other kinds of practices that have the effect of discrimination of one of the protected classes. In housing, we protect discrimination of that sort on all aspects of the rental process, the renting itself, the publishing of available housing, rule setting, the terms and policies that people have, that people have to practice when they're renting, terminations or evictions. We do a fair amount, not that much so far, based on most of those protected classes. There are, we get that we have had them. We can talk about what they look like, what they, what happens to them. But many times those are cases that can go also, because they're protected by state law, they could also go to Michigan Department of Civil Rights or the Fair Housing Center of Southeast and Mid-Michigan. And they have more, because they're working with state laws, they have more opportunities and can deal with bigger issues. So, but we can refer them, and we often do, to those groups. What we're getting now is our complaints about source of income. This is a new one, and this is probably our biggest source of complaints around housing, source of income. Source of income has been on the Ann Arbor ordinance for probably since its inception, maybe even before 1978. But it never had a definition and no one knew what to do with it. And it was hard to enforce. We started getting complaints about what looked like source of income issues. And we inquired and found out that because we didn't have, that there wasn't a good definition of it in the ordinance, for example, and guidance in the ordinance, that it was hard to enforce. So we wrote an amendment to amend the ordinance with a good definition. And here is the definition. Source of income, basically, it's more complicated than this, but basically what it means is any source of income paid directly to an individual derived from any lawful profession or occupation, any contract, agreement, loan or settlement, alimony, for example, child support, any benefit or subsidy program, including housing assistance assistance or housing choice vouchers. And of course, that's where we're getting the most complaints about. There was also, we knew that landlords were asking for for evidence that person who was renting had 3 times the value of their monthly rental assistance as income. And people with vouchers couldn't always do that. There's a statement in the ordinance that says any qualified assistance program shall be treated as income in the amount of 3 times the value of that monthly rental assistance. So that is also covered by the ordinance. No person shall fail to account for any tenant or prospective tenant's entire source of income. That includes that 3 times the voucher amount when using a financial income standard for entering into renewing a tenancy. So that is basically source of income. It is landlords saying, if you don't make enough money, if you don't have a job that gives you this much income, we will not accept you, or we will not accept vouchers. Even when, when the voucher could, in fact, be used as source of income for your rent. We have a second ordinance that we also enforce, and it is called Fair Chance Access to Housing Ordinance. This came about because we had people coming into the commission explaining that in Ann Arbor, it was almost impossible to get housing if you had a felony on your record, even if that felony was years old, even if that felony was minor and had nothing to do with housing. We started to look at it because, you want people who have been in prison and have served their time to have a second chance. We did research. We found out that, in fact, there was no evidence that people who had this kind of background were any poor renters than anybody else. Landlords were not liable for renting to a person with a background of felony, and that this was the fair thing to do, to say that, in fact, if you have a felony, or the landlords can't ask whether or not you have them. It prohibits landlords from using criminal history in the tenant selection, so people with criminal records have a fair opportunity to compete for rental housing. This is a new ordinance, and it requires that this poster be a company request advertisements for open rental, and for any housing provider that's got an office or someplace where people come, it should be shown there at all also. So we're doing those things. We know that you probably see renters a lot who come to you with complaints. If the complaints have to do with this kind of thing, you probably should send them our way. We talk to those people, we mediate, we inform the landlords of the law. And if we can't do anything, we help we find a way to help solve this problem. We can mediate, we can refer it to the city attorney, we can talk to people who have attorneys already. People can use this law to get a fair outcome. So that's what we do. So if you find somebody, if you have people who come to you and have this kind of a problem, please send them to us. We are very committed to fairness in renting, and if there are ways that we can help you, please let us know. Linda, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I'm afraid I lost connection there for a little while, so I didn't hear. I didn't hear everything you said.
Okay.
I do want to clarify one thing, and you may have clarified it when I exited. After I exited, that it's not just the Fair Chance Access to Housing ordinance applies to anybody with any criminal background history at all. So a landlord cannot require any background check. And if they happen to become aware of any criminal background information, they can't use it as a reason to deny somebody, as a reason to not rent to somebody. And we have had a fair number of complaints under that ordinance, which I don't know if Leslie mentioned, was just passed in 2021, maybe a year and a half ago. Right. So it's relatively new, and yeah, there's an education piece that still needs to be happening with landlords. Although the city did send to every registered landlord notice of this new ordinance, so they should have it. So we have received a number of complaints under that ordinance. Generally, all that's required is for us to call and say, hello, this is the Human Rights Commission calling. We understand that you are still doing background checks, or that it's typically that they're doing the background checks. And that, do you know that there's a law in Ann Arbor now that says you're not permitted to do that? And sometimes landlords are surprised by that. Maybe they didn't read the notice that the city sent. But we haven't had any instance where they say, well, I'm not gonna comply with that. You know, we don't know for sure whether with the next tenant that comes along, they do the same thing and the tenant doesn't know to contact us. But that's what we do. And so far we haven't had really any pushback on that. Similarly with source of income, because the definition was only recently clarified and expanded on, there are still, I think, quite a few landlords in Ann Arbor who don't know that they're not permitted to say to a potential tenant, I'm sorry, I don't accept housing vouchers. And in fairness to them, really until even just a month or two ago, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission that kind of oversees a lot of the voucher programs made it sound as though on their website as though opting in was optional. They've since corrected that, and they have a link to our ordinance, and they're now telling landlords that no, it's not optional. You have to accept vouchers. Now, vouchers don't always cover the rent. Landlords are free to charge what they want, and sometimes, you know, the voucher is just not going to be enough. That's complicated. A complicated system that I don't pretend to understand, but we do sometimes call Jennifer. Oh, help me, Leslie.
Hall.
Sorry, Hall, right, at the Housing Commission, yeah, for assistance on these things when they arise. And yeah, so I mean, in general, I guess we're here just to say, you know, if you get wind of anybody who feels that they're being discriminated against under any of those categories, they should go to our website, file a complaint. You can just submit it online. It's very simple. There's a section for the non-discrimination ordinance and a separate complaint for the Fair Chance Access to Housing ordinance. And if we can help, we usually will send them somewhere to some other resource where hopefully they can get help. And similarly, we've actually received calls before you guys existed about issues that really are in your purview now, and we didn't have anywhere to send them to. And maybe now we can. We received a call not that long ago from a mother of a student who was renting at one of the new fancy apartment buildings, who said that the landlord was basically providing a carrot and a stick, saying, if you don't re-up, a month, maybe within weeks after she moved in, I'm going to raise the rent more for next year as a way to get around the new rules that are in place. I did tell, I think, Travis about it. Just hopefully it got to you. I'm sure it did. But so hopefully we can partner, and because we get all kinds of housing complaints, many of which we really can't help with if they don't fall under one of these ordinances. So I think that's it. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Rosanita, I see your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a couple of questions. The first one about accepting housing vouchers. So then, as I just moved back to Ann Arbor during the pandemic, so some of this is newer to me for Ann Arbor. So does this mean then that if someone has a voucher and they go to someone or an apartment complex that previously didn't rent to Section 8 holders or tenant-based voucher holders, that now that landlord has to sign up to be a landlord and go through the inspection process and all of that?
Correct. Yes, correct. And I should add that under our ordinance, under both of the ordinances, actually, people have the option of filing a complaint with us, or they can bring a private right of action with a lawyer. And there is now pending a lawsuit, at least I think it's still pending. The law clinic at the University of Michigan brought a suit against a landlord management company in town that was refusing to accept vouchers. So they're choosing to go the court route. And I'm sure that's putting all the other landlords on notice. We'll see what happens with that case. But yes, in answer to your question, they do have to jump through the hoops that are required to accept vouchers now, which I think does mean another inspection and filling out forms. It doesn't, though, mean that they have to charge a rent that is low enough that the person with the voucher can afford to live there. So they can, charge what they want.
Okay, thank you. And my second question goes to the background checks. That's just a criminal history background check, right? So you still can do a credit check.
Correct,
and
correct.
Given what's happened ever since we've had the eviction moratorium, right? And there's been such an increase in cases in the was it the tenant courts? I just call it the eviction court. For a number of individuals, since that money that we did have is starting to run dry, and they're right, and people do get evictions on their records, is there anything to protect or help them when trying to attach to new housing in the city?
You mean because they have that eviction notice?
Because they have that eviction,
yeah.
right? Because they have the notice, even if everything got paid off, it could still be that they have that notice.
You'd have to ask a lawyer about that. I'm afraid I don't know of any way that we can help with that.
No,
what do you think, Leslie?
Not yet, but we can look into it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the future because of
it's a good question
right now.
No, it is a good question.
We'll look.
That was it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanita. Those are really good questions. And I see Arthur's hand raised.
Yes, my question is, if you were to find that a landlord is intentionally trying to charge more just to avoid the voucher system, and what is in place to correct that with that landlord?
Do you mean with one person? He's saying that it's more expensive than it really is?
Right, just to avoid having to deal with the voucher Because like you just said previously, a landlord can charge what he wants. So if he has, let's use $1,000 for instance, to get in. But once he find out that this person has a voucher and he decides, okay, well, now the rent is $1,500, to avoid having to accept that person with the voucher.
If we can show, I think, Linda, you'll let me know if that's true. I think if we can show that the landlord then rented it, the place for the original price, it's starting to look like discrimination, and we can do something about it. I mean, it's a case that would have to be made. Is that true, Linda?
That sounds right to me. I mean, we haven't encountered it. You know, I'm not sure. We haven't encountered it. I just know in my conversations with Jennifer Hall, basically, you know, landlords can charge what they want, but they can't charge, you know, they can't charge what Leslie's saying. They can't charge more because to get rid of somebody and then lower the rent again, you know, that would be clearly discrimination on the basis of source of income. It's a great question. And I don't know if it's happening. It might be, but no one has brought it to our attention. If you get any, you know, if you hear that it is, let us know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Another really good question. Thanks, Arthur. And I have some questions. I guess to begin, I think what you were hitting on there is that like it's well, I guess one reaction to what you've just said, I suppose, is that it might be really difficult to determine what the landlord's reason is for offering the price that they're offering. So even if they offer more, and it could be because they don't want to take someone with a voucher, it's almost impossible to prove, I would assume. So one question I have is, how are you aware of any system to try to test for that, like any sort of auditing system? Yeah, or do you do that yourselves?
One of the reasons that Fair Housing Center is so good is that they do a secret shopper kind of thing, where they have a slew of people who've been trained to act as though they are, you know, going to do this, renting, for example, and we'll see if everybody is treated the same. And for some of these kinds of questions, that is the best way to find out if somebody is doing that. The other way is to find out, you know, again, if you, for example, have gone to tried to rent a place and they were told that the place has already been sold, you know, it's just been rented. And then somebody goes the next day and finds out that it's not been rented. You start amassing circumstantial evidence, which we can confront the landlord with. The more, you know, I mean, you start coming up with a case, and a landlord and the Human Rights Commission or an attorney could use that information to try to get recompense.
Thank you. And that's the Fair Housing Center of Southeast and Mid Michigan?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. And they also do these activities for local laws as well, it sounds like.
No, only when, no, it has to be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And I'm just looking in their little brochure now. I think there are, I'm not sure. I'll have to look at the current lawsuit to see whether, because they were the ones that sent it to the law clinic. And I don't know if they did a little bit of testing themselves on this, or maybe they didn't need to because it was so blatant. And the landlord was just saying, no, I'm not going to take vouchers. I should know, but I don't know if the Fair Housing Act or federal HUD law, has these source of income kinds of protections.
Yeah, I don't know about source of income.
I feel like they do. I think I've read that somewhere, in which case I think the Fair Housing Center could do testing, but I'm not sure about that. But we have no, we're like you, we're a bunch of volunteers, zero resources, and we're just not set up to do testing like that. It would be really nice, especially when we get like race discrimination claims. It's so hard to prove when you're not without that. You really need that. And fair housing will absolutely do it in a sort of race discrimination kind of case. And we often refer cases to them, and they're great.
Okay, thank you. And if you haven't been in touch with Representative Jason Morgan, who's sponsoring legislation on the state level to ban source of income
You know that,
discrimination,
yes.
great. Okay, I just want to make sure, because I think if you have any
Right.
insight, that I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. And then just last question, and we'll move on from me anyway. You mentioned that landlords can't obviously discriminate based on source of income, but sounds like they can still discriminate based on your overall income. Is that right? So if you don't have enough income, even if following the rules that you mentioned with the 3 times, if it's through a voucher, for example, they can still deny you based on that?
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they have, I mean, if their rule is that it has to be 3 times then they can't, because the rule has to apply to everybody equally.
Right. Okay. So they can still have rules based on the amount of income.
But if they say you have to make $1 million a month and you don't, you know.
Are you asking if someone if the rent is, $1,500 and a person has a voucher, if the person has to make $4,500, or if the person just has to have the $500 because the 30% is their portion of the rent?
If they, how much, what were we talking about?
I've got a bigger number normally, because before here I was living in DC, and DC would give like a really nice poster that was like really easy to understand. And so it's like, say a low number, if the rent was, say, $300 a month, right? I mean, it's hypothetical, extremely hypothetical, but rent was $300 a month. You have a voucher, you and your income level is, if you have $100 a month, but you have a voucher, which covers that other 2/3, then you qualify because 3 times the income is met with that voucher.
Right.
Correct.
Is that what you were asking, or are you asking if the rent was like, $800 and all you had, including the voucher, was $300?
I guess I was just asking about general requirements for what your income has to be in order to rent someplace. So I apologize, I got a little lost in the numbers. It's been a long day. But yeah, so I was just wondering, can they lay down rules based on saying if you don't make a certain amount, then you cannot rent here, and they'll take into consideration the vouchers and triple that and all that stuff.
As far as
yeah.
Go ahead, Leslie.
I don't know.
I mean, as far anything that can't be pinned as discrimination based on having a voucher, that's particular to the person with the voucher, would probably not be something we could touch. These are but it gets complicated with the vouchers, and we do often have to go and ask legal services or ask Jennifer Hall, what about this situation? What about that situation?
Just the reason why I ask is because I think I've run into a few situations where the parents of a student are abroad and aren't able to give the income, or aren't able to really deal with the paperwork, but they still require that the student renter provides the income amount in order to rent there. And I was wondering if that was actually allowed or not.
No, it's actually not. I mean, right? Leslie puts a definition up. I mean, if they can get the money from the family, is that what you're asking? It doesn't have to be the students. It can come from any source.
Yeah, I think there was an issue with. Yeah, I think. So long as it's filed in the parents. Okay.
And that's what source of income is. It's money is money.
Yeah.
It specifically says a gift too.
Yes.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to Lucy.
Yeah, thanks. It's really great to have you both here. Really love the presentation. Yeah, I hope we can keep collaborating. I wanted to ask two questions. One is, you said that you've received a lot, your housing has taken up a lot more of your attention in recent years, and I was wondering if you had insights on why that is. And then my second question, with the Fair Housing Act, it seems like the enforcement is going really well, and that Human Rights Commission, that's kind of your purview, and that there's good systems for that. We've had a bit more trouble with enforcing some other tenants' rights stuff. So I was wondering if you could tell us why, and how you've been effective at that.
Oh, I don't know I don't know how effective. I mean, we actually think there should be way more. I will answer your first question, and the reason we have more is, I think, because of the source of income being redefined and kind of out there in a way that, even though it's been in our ordinance for years, people weren't aware of it, and landlords were able to just say, no, we don't accept housing vouchers. This is all brand new. So there's a learning curve, which involves these complaints and then educating the landlords. And the same is true for the fair chance access to housing and not being able to do criminal background checks, because that too is new. So I think that explains why we're getting more, because those are the two categories that we're seeing more of.
The other thing I think is two things. One is that we are working with professionals who know more than we do and who we can turn to for help, so that we've got buy-in before it's passed. Secondly, we have extra buy-in with this poster, for example, and we've circulated the poster and the idea with people who are returning from prison, and they're forming a group of support for this kind of thing, telling people who are out of prison, arming them with the information so that they go to the landlord already prepared for somebody to ask them, so that they can say, see, you don't have to.
No, you can't. No, you don't.
Can't. That's right. That's right. You can't.
Yeah.
Ask this.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really great to hear from you both.
Julia?
I think it just really helps, having the Fair Housing Center. And it would be great if, for general tenants issues, there was an equivalent nonprofit that could pick up and address the problems, and had a team of attorneys, because in fair housing law, you can sue for attorney's fees, and that's much more difficult in general tenant cases.
Yes.
And Zachariah, I don't know if that was all clarified for you, if there's something I could clarify more. I did work on fair housing for a number of years in Chicago.
Thank you, Julia. If I have any, I may follow up with you on that, just to make sure I'm crystal clear on it, but I don't want to take up the commission's time. So are there any other questions?
Could I add one more
Linda.
thing? I did take a look at your good website. I mean, for a new commission, it's got a lot of good information on there. And I went to the tenant resources page, and you do very nicely talk about how, if you feel like you've been discriminated against, contact the Human Rights Commission. It'd be great if you could add a separate blurb about the Fair Chance Access to Housing Ordinance, and with a brief explanation about it, about landlords not being allowed to do criminal background checks. And if they do, or they're insisting on it, or they use any information about your criminal background to deny you a rental, then file a complaint and link our page again. So if somebody wants to just add that, that would be great.
Yes.
Thank you, Linda. I just made a note here, and we'll bring it up at we have this tenant education meeting where we usually talk about how to educate tenants through our website, among other ways. And I'm sure we'll talk about it there and make sure that's added. And thank you, Kristen, for all your help with the website. Thank you to everybody who has helped. I'm very happy to hear that. Okay, any other questions?
I just have one.
Go ahead.
My only question is, we are talking strictly about Ann Arbor, right? Yeah. Ann Arbor is the only one that falls up under that umbrella.
That's right.
Okay, okay.
That means
And we
no
do-
townships, no.
No, yeah, we do. We have to turn people away all the time. They think they live in Ann Arbor, but our non-discrimination ordinance and the Fair Chance Access to Housing only applies to the city of Ann Arbor. Yeah,
And the background checks.
and the background checks, correct.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, and what's the best way to get in contact with the two of you and the rest of the commission?
We can provide email address.
We put it, is
Okay.
there a way for us to,
Is there a chat?
don't see a chat thing. so-
There's not a chat.
I'll send
Okay.
it to you.
Okay.
Chris, I saw you just unmuted.
Yeah, I'm happy to send that information out for the group.
Great.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your
you.
presentation. It was much appreciated.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Lunch.
Okay, wonderful. I really appreciated that presentation. And with that, I think, you know, if you have any questions, I guess direct it to the two of them. And Kristen's going to share that contact information. So you can move on to 7-B, zoning, housing / sustainability presentation and discussion. That's a consultant from Planning Services. So Megan, I understand, is going to present to us. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. Just want to give a little background on the project and who I am and whatnot. And thank you so much for having us here. My name is Megan Masson-Minnock. I'm with Carlisle Wortman Associates. We're an urban planning consulting firm that's located here in the city. And a lot of our staff live in the city. And we were asked by the city planning staff to work with the Planning Commission to look at zoning downtown and premiums and what they incentivize. A presentation and a report were in your packet, but before we dive into that, I wanted to give a brief one-on-one on zoning and also on how premiums work. So if anyone is an expert in zoning, I'm going to apologize right now. For the next 5 to 10 minutes. I recognize that not everybody is as enthusiastic as I am. So just want to have everybody on the same page. So zoning is an ordinance in your city that says what can happen on a piece of land, what use inside a building or on there. So I rated my kids' Lego box. So this is a piece of land. And then it says where a building can go on it and how big the building can be. And then also once it's on it, where the yards can be. So how far it would have to be set back from a property line. And what Ann Arbor has done since the 1960s has said in our downtown, we want to incentivize some things. So we've always offered extra building blocks, if you will. So that's the reason I use the Legos. And this, you're going to hear me say FAR a lot, and that's floor to area ratio. And 100% FAR is like with this, where the the building completely covers the lot. So this is 100 FAR, but then it doesn't have to be the developer or the builder. They can put these blocks any way they want. As long as it complies with other requirements that the city might have. In order to get things that the city can't require, the first one was pedestrian amenities. So that's 100 FAR. What they've done is they've offered extra building blocks, so more FAR. So then you got more FAR for providing something to the city. Usually not that much, and I'll go into a little bit more about that. But does anybody have any questions about what zoning is and how these bonus FARs work that are called premiums? Well, great. I'm so glad that my children like to use Legos. I'm going to set those aside. And then Kristen, I can share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I am going to go here. All right. Can I get a thumbs up or a nod? Yes. Okay, great. And then I am going to just click over here. So we're on the cover page, right? Downtown zoning. And then, excuse me, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. Okay. And then we'll go down to a team, we're gonna, no, that did not go. There you go. So do you see team introduction, team and project introduction?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Just went over that briefly, but we've been working with the Planning Commission for a number of months now. And then if you're interested in looking at all the materials, there was a link to that page in the report that was given to you. And all our reports with a lot of data behind them are there. And I'm going to hit the highlights of what we've done. But tonight want to go over current premiums, what they are, what our research was, and what the assumptions are of the Planning Commission based on that research, what their goals are. And they asked us to come to you to ask you for your opinions on 2 policy options that they're looking at. And of course, at the end, we would say thank you. So current premiums, so those are those building blocks. Remember, this is what they offer building blocks for, is affordable residential units. And this is in the D1 or D2 districts only. So that's in the downtown districts. And I'll have a map for that in just a bit later. There's also, and those are 3 tiers, and the percentage is dependent on the percentage of affordable housing dwelling units provided. And that's where people have to work with Jennifer at the Housing Commission, and then they get permit. They work through that system, and sometimes it's the developer providing those units, and sometimes they can pay in lieu. Also, there's green building. So if anybody is LEED, is a certification that's been internationally known for over a decade now, and you basically a building or a site gets a different score. So that's what you can see is 50, 100%, and 250% with silver, gold, and platinum. These are things that the city can't require due to state law. The energy code and the building code are set at the state level. So these are things that the city can't require. Whereas if you go to California or some other states, individual cities change their building codes in order to require some of these things. Historic preservation also was one where they gave 50% FAR, so 50% of that lot. That pedestrian amenity that's been since 1966, and they have a formula of 10 square feet with a maximum of 8,000 square feet. So we're making everybody do math. There's definitions of what an arcade is in our plaza, and also incentivizes public parking. And that's in the D1 district only. When I D1, those are where the tallest buildings are, so where it's the most dense. And that can get up to 200% when the parking is available to the public. I'm not going to necessarily go through all of these. The D1, D2 are the districts that we're talking about. TC1 is along traffic corridors, C1 and C2, and R4 are near around the downtown. And this shows where they're allowable by right, where they allow bonuses, and where there's a maximum height. And the message really that we want you to take away from this slide is that in that TC1, you can see, and those are outside of the downtown along major corridors. Those buildings could actually be bigger than buildings that are in downtown. And when you look at planning and zoning, traditionally, that's a very odd situation. Usually your tallest buildings, your densest areas are allowed in the downtown. And so that was something that we highlighted for the Planning Commission, something that they were thinking about in terms of not only maybe changing what the incentives are, but then also, do we allow more building blocks by right or in the downtown? So we were asked to review a number of things in order to help the Planning Commission have context for these decisions. Number one, we went over city plans and policies, and those were from 2000 until now. We looked at projects in the downtown, and when we looked at that, we looked at permitted projects that were built. Sometimes there's a lot of projects that go through and they get approval, but they don't get built, or they change in a major way. And so when we have, you'll see a graph in here pretty soon where it has the number of dwelling units. That's the number of dwelling units that were built, not that were approved. And sometimes those are different. We looked at market data and also best practices in similar communities. And we conducted a number of interviews with city staff, some elected officials. Also, we're interviewing developers, nonprofit and for-profit right now. And when we looked at the premiums and how they've matured over the years, as I said, the first ones were in 1966. And the things in bold, those are big changes. The things that are in regular font, so the things that are in regular font, so in like 1988 definition changes, these are things that were minor. These are things more that clarified things or added a smaller standard. These up here are really big changes. So in 1966, that's when the premiums were first introduced. So the first time, again, you have optional building blocks. In 1994, it was added a residential premium because at that point, the city recognized they weren't getting as many residential units as they wanted, especially in the downtown. They were getting a lot of office. In 2009, based on coming out of some mass planning that they did for the downtown, the city changed those incentives to really then look at these kind of what we're calling a large menu. So incentivizing affordable housing, green building, public parking, historic preservation. So that list that I talked about in the beginning, that's when that was introduced. And then in 2019, when context that's been provided by city staff was that at 2019, it seemed like development would never end in the downtown, that development was going to come no matter what. There was lots of people banging down the door. And at that point, they said, we really need affordable housing. And so they combined that residential and affordable housing premium together because they recognized that over time, they weren't getting the affordable housing that they wanted, and linked those two together. However, what happened, and we can see that as we looked at population changes over time, so we took data from Esri market analysis. So that's data from a national source, and they look at census blocks. And so we looked at the census blocks that are in the D1 and D2 and said, okay, did it change? And in 2004, there was a downtown residential task force, and they set a goal of 1,000 new housing units in the downtown by 2015. When we looked at this, we saw that by 2022, that increase, you hit that increase. We've hit that increase. And so that task force was achieved. They wanted it to be achieved by here, but it didn't happen until around here. The other thing you'll note is like right here at 2010, when you have that census, you could see all of a sudden that line to the next census in 2020, the trajectory of it, the slope of it changed, and it increased in terms of the rate of residential units that were being built in the downtown. So we felt, looking at that, you can associate some of that to this, probably. We need to dig a little bit deeper, but there's an indication. So then we were asked to look at number of housing units that were built by projects and whether they use premiums or not. And the Planning Commission asked us to look at these policy windows. So, and A2D2 is that group in 2009. That's how the city referred to it at that point. Here from 2009 to 2018 was when they had this large menu. here in 2017 to 2019, they broke it into a 2-tier system to make it simpler to understand for developers. And in 2019, there was that change for affordable units being required as part of any residential premium. I also had the Great Recession in here in 2009 to 2012. And then obviously in recent years, we've had the pandemic affected everybody in a way, but it also affected the real estate market in a very real way at that time. And you could say that it still might be in recovery, and how what's being built and what's there's market for hasn't really shook out yet. But you can see pretty solidly up until 2014, most of the things being built in the downtown didn't use premiums. I mean, used premiums. So they used the blue. And then after you had this 2-tier, after you had this change to require affordable units with residential, you started to have more projects that were being built. So whereas in here we had 3 projects that were being built with premiums, over here you can see it's 1-to-1, 1-to-1, 2-to-1 in these subsequent years. And the premiums, the premiums deliver a lot, obviously, especially when they're using residential premiums, they deliver a lot more housing units. And so the question from the Planning Commission is really the premiums are they delivering what we want? Zachariah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry to interject here, but I just want to clarify something. On the y-axis there, is that the number of units?
That's the number of units.
And then and then the number above each bar is the number of projects.
Approved that year, yes.
Approved that year, okay. Thank you, I was a little confused, thanks.
No, thanks for clarifying. It's hard to.
And they're just dwelling units, not affordable housing units, correct?
They are just dwelling units, not affordable housing units. Jeff, I see your hands up.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback. So if you look at 2013, it says there's 302 units. Are those 300 units divided amongst the 2 projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Any more questions in this? Okay, Zachary. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. The 2-tier system, can you recap that just one more time? Because I think I lost that.
So what the 2-tier system did was it said all of these get X amount of premiums, all of these get another. Oh, no, that's not it. The 2-tier system was that we have a gate. You have to meet a certain amount of green building standards in order to even get a premium. And so they had that, and then that unlocked the long laundry list. And you still have that. So what you still have is there's a gate. They have to meet the gate. Then that unlocks. And then they have this long menu that a developer could choose from, whether they're a nonprofit developer or for-profit developer. Okay. I'm seeing from your body language that is clarified.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move to the next slide, if that's okay. So also one of the things we looked at was what property is really eligible for premiums. So I keep on saying the D1, the D2, and that's shown everywhere in brown and everywhere in green. And just to orient people, so this is South U, and then here's Liberty, and then I believe City Hall. We go down here on to 5th Street. City Hall's right here. So the brown and the green are all places that are zoned D1, D2. But the green are the only places within the D1, D2 that are eligible for these premiums, because in the 2009 changes, they said premiums are only available in places that are not historic districts, and then there's no floodplain. So you can see that brown takes a lot of that area out. Then also planning staff asked us to look at, when we looked at the permits, to say, okay, anything that's been built in the last 15 years, we don't think that that's going to be redeveloped in the next 10 years. So let's in some way graphically take those out of the equation. So for instance, right here on North Main Street, there's been two new projects. Those we're going to say aren't going to be redeveloped. So really those kind of take those out. And the gist of this map is that there's limited area where the premiums can be used right now. And then we look through city plans and policies. And on the top here, these are all the things that the premiums incentivize: affordable housing and residential, pedestrian activity, greater mix of land uses, energy efficiency, preservation of historic buildings, public parking. As we go down here, these are all the plans and policies that have been put into place by the city. We started in 2003 with the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority TIF plan. So that's what's saying what the DDA is going to do. 2006 and 2009, this is the ones that came into the A2D2 master plan. You have a sustainability framework in 2013, the Allen Creek Urban Trail, Ann Arbor moving together towards Vision Zero. So that's in transportation and carbon neutrality. And so these work down from as far away to as nearest. And you can see as we go down, we get less check marks. So really, these incentives, while they were doing a good job of delivering what your plans and policies were in the early aughts, as we move in time to the 2020s, they're not delivering on what your stated goals are. And they're not structured to. So when we presented all this to the Planning Commission, we asked them to come to agreement on assumptions. And I'm not going to read through these. I'm going to hit the highlights. But basically, we're assuming that an equilibrium of development types is important in that downtown. But also recognizing that developing in the downtown is more difficult and can be more expensive than elsewhere in the city. A lot of times you're knocking down a building or you're adding to a building, and that is inherently more expensive than if it's a vacant site, or if the site is only covered 25%, whereas in the downtown, a lot of times the building is 80% or more of the land covering it. Also, recognizing that since 2019, there's an affordable housing millage that's been passed. But so with every new building, you get new tax dollars that go towards affordable housing. But really, in talking to folks in the city who are working in affordable housing, that millage is not enough to be the sole source. Also recognizing when you're looking at premiums, there's a number of them that aren't eligible for premiums. So you got a significant number of properties. And when we looked at what that current downtown residential development is delivering, it's either high-end, low-scale residential buildings, so 4 stories, luxury condos, or student housing. What the market right now is not delivering is attainable, high-density housing downtown. And the Planning Commission really wanted to recognize that attainable density in the downtown not only provides places for present and future Ann Arborites, but it also influences regional stability by providing access to housing region-wide in a walkable mixed-use place. But also when we talked to developers and when we looked at the data, those current premiums are not being utilized for a variety of reasons. Some of the things that have been cited is that they're complicated, that they sometimes staff and developers or lawyers disagree on what premium is what. And there's not, so, and also for developers, it was hard to have a long menu. They very strongly said a shorter menu is better. So Jamie, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. On your previous slide, I was just curious if, because what you just said kind of jogged my brain. So if there's not an expiration on these, like I see that first one goes to 2033. If there's no expiration, are these still like up for grabs or?
So these are plans that are still guiding the city.
Okay.
This master plan land use element, the city is hired a consultant, and they are going to start a master plan process to update that master plan, I believe in the fall.
Okay.
So generally, from a good planning principle point of view, anything that's more than 10 years old sometimes gets a little questionable. And really that's when the time that the city should start looking at whether to update that, to update that and say whether it's still valid, or whether it needs to be tweaked, or whether it needs to be updated in a more comprehensive way.
Okay, thank you.
Travis.
Thanks. And just for everybody on here, if you have been paying attention to the city as well, you will not hear us referring to the work that we're doing right now as the master plan update. So we are now referring it to our comprehensive land use plan. And so if you've heard us talking about that, that is the same thing. When we update it, we will be changing the terminology there.
Thank you for that clarification, Travis. All right. So then we asked the Planning Commission, what are really your goals for the downtown and these premiums? And they said, number one, to increase housing downtown. And that was just the number of units. And they recognize that maybe we can't do all of these, but they wanted us to go to stakeholders like you, the Renters Commission, with all of these and get input, and including on these the two policy options. They also wanted to explore as a goal increasing sustainability, including energy efficiency in the downtown. As I mentioned before, some of those things we can't require due to the way things are set up in Michigan. Also to increase accessibility in the downtown, and that meant barrier-free units or units that are built with universal design so that anybody of any mobility can use them. Also to increase housing attainability or affordability in the downtown. And when we're looking at that, we're really talking about 60% of the area median income. Or that could be 60, 80, 100. That's something that can be further defined as we go along. And that's something, if you wanted to talk about tonight, we would really welcome that. And also to increase the diversity of housing options. Again, feel like the market is just delivering these high-end residential, low density, 3 to 4 stories, and then really high density student housing. So in terms of variety of buildings, looking for something in the middle of those where it's not, some of that might relate to the number of bedrooms, because student housing is often 4 to 5 to 6 bedrooms. But then also there might be a price point in there. And there would be a variety of ways to look at that and measure that. So the two policy approaches they wanted us to talk to you about is a small menu. So taking that large menu and decreasing it to either something dealing with housing or something dealing with sustainability, or maybe just two options that are very, very clear. Or whether it's a choice to have no premiums and just increase the number of building blocks that you could have in the downtown. And would that be an option? What that would do is that would likely increase the number of residential units and bring more money into the millage, more money into the Affordable Housing Fund via the millage. So what we'd like to have is talk to you about what your thoughts are on each approach. Would it achieve the Planning Commission goals? And do you think there's any unintended consequences? And with the permission of the group, what I would like to do is to stop the share screen unless somebody really needs the visual, and then have everyone talk and I'll take notes. Would that work, or does somebody need the visual? Okay, I see a thumbs up. I'm going to take that as agreement. So let me get to the Zoom and stop the share. All right. So what are people's thoughts on that small menu, whether it's housing or sustainability?
And you say housing or sustainability, you're saying that it's going to be the items that will move us forward more towards the goals that the city has for the A20 plan. Is that right?
For the
climate
A20 plan
action
or
and-
for creating more housing units or
Okay.
housing affordability?
And under housing, is this saying that it's just rentals, or does this also include purchasing, condo options for people who are of middle incomes as well? So since you were saying, luxury or student housing or rentals,
it could include both.
Mm-hmm.
It could include both purchase or rental.
And does it also include the because it said one of the stated goals was increased accessibility, does that also then, when you're saying housing or sustainability, also include saying, hey, here's a premium when you're putting in the universal design aspects?
Yes, that would be on the table. So I think what we want to know from you is, what are your thoughts? What would be most important from your perspective? What do you feel would achieve the Planning Commission's goals? And do you think there would be any unintended consequences?
And just to clarify, we're sort of choosing between the small menu option versus the no premium option?
Yes.
Okay.
But you can feel free to suggest something else or wander. They really wanted your input.
I mean, I guess I could just say, I think my initial reaction, I appreciate the presentation. There's a lot of great info in there that I think I will need more time to fully digest, but I think just my initial reaction is preferring the small menu option, driving more affordable housing development rather than, I guess, sort of more of the hands-off approach of just letting people develop and then hoping that generates more funds that could be used for affordable housing.
Thank you.
I prefer the small menu option if there's a way to streamline it for the developers so that we can get those needed benefits, then I think that that's really important. There's always going to be some type of unintended consequence, whatever you do, right? Like,
right.
And I know that sometimes it can seem like in Ann Arbor, it's, is it county versus student? And so for some, it would be like an unintended consequence would be that the students who were forced to live outside of Ann Arbor would then occupy downtown. So you'd still have kind of a transient population there, where you'd have a turnover every certain number of years. But on the other side of that, I think that if you add units where you have, the ability for people who are more middle income to be able to make purchases, then it could incentivize it so that we don't lose students after they graduate and they become and stay Ann Arbor residents, as well as in the near term, attracting more people, or a closer term, attracting more people to actually be able to buy units in the downtown.
Julia?
Thank you. All right. I see Julia's hand up.
Hi. I generally don't do well with either or.
Okay.
I think that there's plenty of room for Ann Arbor to be denser than it is. And I think that the slight offering of premiums hasn't been enough to do affordable housing. And you a couple of times mentioned because there is some state prohibitions. And I'd like to encourage the city to perhaps pass a resolution to encourage Lansing to get rid of the preemptions it has on things like inclusionary zoning. And that if we had some mandatory requirements, sure, you want to build these luxury units, you have to have a percentage set aside for affordable units. Instead of just trying to get it the premium way, because it hasn't worked all that great. So I would like to see some change in the zoning laws to allow for increased density. And I definitely do want there to be more affordable housing. So if a premium's going to suddenly start working great in that procedure, I'm all for it.
Okay, so more of a yes and increase the density, but also have a premium to offer, specifically around housing affordability.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Zachariah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I second Julia's comments there, but I have a question about the affordable housing units. For what period of time do they have to remain affordable according to the definition? You know, can they be affordable for 1 year and then they are no longer?
No. It's I believe it's affordable in perpetuity. So I think there's a formula with housing that I think it's 10 years. And then if it's rental, that it is that for a certain amount of time. I think Travis, though, has a clarification probably on that.
Where I have seen it a couple of times where we've added it into, it's been for like a period of 99 years, and which is essentially in most cases the life of the building. And so, but yeah, generally it's a pretty significant period of time. Yeah, if not in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Good to know. Yeah, and yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And I think one potential downside to having let's see, no premiums and just including the AFR, right? Area floor ratio. Okay. Would be that you might get fewer affordable housing units in the downtown area, but then the affordable units, because of the money that would bring in for the millage, would then be built kind of further away. So you might have sort of a segregated effect based on income over time. I'm not sure if that would happen, but that is a concern I have. And I think that I know a lot of planners want to see mixed income areas, which I think would be ideal. And then, and if you, I guess this is really under both situations, we're not guaranteed to have our sustainability goals met, but I think that if to choose between the two of those, the shorter menu may have provide at least some benefit in terms of meeting our sustainability goals. Well, I'm not sure if just doing AFR will to the same extent. Well, I'm actually not certain about that, so scratch that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take the hands in the order I see them. So Travis, Jeff, and then Lucy. I just, Zachariah, is it okay that I'm calling people's names because you're the chair? I really shouldn't. Okay, thanks.
No, take them as you
right.
have the time.
All right. So Travis.
Yeah, thank you. I will be really brief because I don't want to distract too much from this conversation. But in response to Julia, I did want to acknowledge that the city, ending state preemption of inclusionary zoning or exclusionary zoning is in our legislative policy agenda. We are actually not only asking for the repeal of the preemption, we're asking the state to incentivize allowing duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes by right, so that it's not just something we can do, but that other cities are incentivized as well. And we also went a step further that, and part of our agenda as well is asking the state to mandate that affordable housing planning be part of every city's state mandated comprehensive plan. Again, because we don't want to just look at a solution for Ann Arbor, but we want to look for, we know that this housing crisis extends beyond our borders as well. But those are priorities for us at the state level. So I just wanted to inform that as well. I know that that conversation is existing outside of this. This is very much focused on within our current parameters, but I just wanted to make sure that that was out there.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yes, thank you. My question is about, we've talked a lot about affordability. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the definition for affordable is based on the local median income, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any discussion about, I have to look up the number. I haven't looked it up, but I assume for Ann Arbor, it's relatively high for Ann Arbor residents.
Yeah.
Some sort of methodology that would incentivize going, somehow lower than that to become truly affordable for folks, especially in terms of increasing diversity in the neighborhoods.
Okay. Yeah, when we talk to the nonprofit housing developers, they talked a lot about how it's difficult to build housing on the lowest end for affordability, so that 0 to 25% AMI. But also when you're building, that's one of the reasons that it's difficult is that there's a lot of services usually that's involved. And then also there's management of the building. And that's something that for-profit developers are not good at. And so there's kind of I think once you decide what the priorities are, it's easier then to say, okay, this is where we're going to target. I guess my question back to you, Jeff, is that do you feel what do you feel in terms of affordability? And there's a range of affordability. What do you feel is most important to target or incentivize with these premiums?
For me, I think about, folks that are working in our downtown areas, gig incomes, things like that are both, they're sporadic sometimes, predominantly tip and, wage earners, things like that, that, might not be making that AMI. And then, we want them to be on time with them to live in the places where they work, things like that. We've got these bike paths everywhere, but the people that would use the bike paths to get to work actually live in a place where they can use the bike paths to get to work, that kind of thing.
And then I'm going to throw it to Kristen. Kristen, did you have something that was clarifying that you wanted to add on this?
No, I just had my hand raised. I saw Arthur raise his hand a couple of times, and I want to touch on that, make sure I didn't get missed because he was raising his.
Okay, Arthur, you were after. All right, Arthur, you were after Lucy. I will not forget you. All right. Anything else, Jeff?
No, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Lucy.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I want to echo Julia's comments, and I think Jeff's comments about the income is really important, though probably either of these plans don't address that issue. So that's something that we should talk about as the commission. If the median income is getting higher and higher, and that's not a very good metric for creating affordable housing. In terms of the options, the small menu seems like definitely the better one to me. I have serious concerns about the second one. But with that said, it's not clear to me that the small menu is really sufficient for meeting our affordable housing goals. To be honest, I don't understand the technicalities of it. So it's hard for me to really weigh in, but I think let me ask a question actually, so that I can understand. If you can buy yourself out of the building affordable housing units, right? Like that's the in lieu of, and is that included in the small menu still?
That could be on the table for small menu. What we've heard from developers is that they would prefer to the 100% in lieu. Right now, that's not an option underneath the premiums. But if somebody did a PUD, which is a different zoning animal, and also keep in mind, this is one of many of your tools for meeting your affordable housing goals. This tool is not suited to be the only one. Anything in zoning is a bit of a like blunt force hammer. And sometimes you need a more fine-grained tool. So that aside, what we've heard from developers is if this was changed and an affordable housing requirement was there, they would be more likely to take it if it was 100% in lieu. But there are some optics to that in terms of being able to, buy, quote unquote, buy yourself out of it. And that the city might not want to offer that. And, or also there's some things with, there's been some questions about whether that is 100% legal, 100% in lieu being an only option for a premium, whether that noses up to that impact fees, which are not allowed under Michigan. So
okay, I guess I would say, like, if the small menu can account, to me, it's a problem that the developers can do the 100% buyout. So if there's a way to inhibit that with the small menu, that seems like a problem that we should also be trying to solve to build more affordable housing.
Thank you. All right. And Arthur, I promised that you were next. Or Lucy, are you done? Anything else?
Yeah, thanks for answering my question. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Arthur.
Okay. I am so glad that she was so eloquently able to say that she didn't really understand it all, because I feel the same way. However, the way Julia addressed it and the things that she said, the comments, the way that she approached it, I totally agree with that. My only thing is trying to understand the affordability, because the Walmart greeter and the Walmart manager, those are two different affordability incomes, right? So, it's just kind of difficult to try to figure out what level of income is affordable to who and to which developer. That was my question.
Okay. And this question of affordability and what it is always comes up whenever the city or other municipalities I've worked with have this conversation. And really what helps is to have numbers. So if the average median income moves, and so when I said 30% AMI, if the average, we're just going to use even numbers. If the average median income is $100,000, then 30% AMI means that it's $30,000 a year is that. And then you can use those ranges to target who that housing is for. And that can be over a set period of time. As Travis said, it's usually when the policy you're trying to do it for the lifetime of the building.
Okay.
Did that clarify, Arthur?
Somewhat.
Okay. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, and it moves. And then also, I think it helps if you can put just like you said, a Walmart greeter or a Walmart clerk. Those are things that people understand, that we all understand, and we can put a face to what to the housing that we're creating.
Right.
And
affordability.
Yes, and at this point, I think that the planning commission hasn't gotten to that point. They're choosing whether they do the small menu or nothing at all. And then if they choose to do something with housing, then that's when they start looking at where those are. And also that this might change over time. In 5 years or 4 years, if it's not working, you can change your zoning and update it.
Can I get you to put yourself in my shoes for 1 second?
Sure. Yeah.
You know more about both of the plans that we're discussing than anybody else on this panel. If you had to make a decision, if you had to vote on this, which way would you go?
I would probably do what Julia asked, which is a yes, and that you increase the base FAR and then decide on one thing that's most important to you and then incentivize that.
You kind of backpedal on that because what would your decision be?
What would my decision be personally?
Yeah. Right, there we go.
Okay, so well, I'm not a city resident, so I live in Scioto Township for full disclosure. Personally, with the things that I know is that I would uncap the FAR to increase it and then have just one incentive for housing affordability. And then I would work with the experts in your city to see which group needs it the most and would have the most impact with that.
I thank you. I hate putting you on the spot like that, but that was the only way I could try to get the clarification that I needed. Thank you.
No problem. I appreciate you, Arthur. Thanks. All right. Okay. So the hands up that I see, I've heard from you before, and I just want to make sure that from Robert, Kimberly, Cynthia, and John, that do you have anything to share before we go round again? Robert.
One thing I would say is that developers have a lot less choices, have very few choices in this matter. I've talked to some, and the financing is usually quite specific and controlling. So I think that is an issue that I know that there's even the nonprofit developers who really want to do things frequently cannot because they can't get financing. So we should. I mean, and I think that you're well aware of this, but I would hope that we would not get ourselves in a bind where financing is less available or more expensive or something that's going to kind of act in opposition to these objectives, which I very much agree with them. I just don't know if the financing supports it, or how we do policies that sort of incentivize the financing.
That is an excellent point, Robert. Yeah, that is an excellent point. That is very true. That it's not just the developers themselves who are making choices, it's their financiers, and they have certain parameters that they're looking for. And they've gotten more and more conservative over the past decade in terms of what they'll finance. All right, so I see Rosnita and then Travis.
I don't live downtown, and so I don't know the answer to this one, but currently, or during that time, or I guess also during that time period when you showed us on the graph the exponential growth there of the buildings, how many of the people who are living in those buildings are families, like people who have kids? Is it mainly people who are single or a childless couple?
Yeah, I don't have good data on that. What I do know is, just for clarification, I've been part of these conversations with the city in 2013 and 2017 when I worked for a different firm. And in those cases, when we looked at what had been built, the majority of things that had been built were student housing with the incentives. So that was the majority of housing. It was 4 to 5 bedrooms that during that spike after 2009. So most of those buildings were not being occupied by families. And then anecdotally from staff is that the buildings that are being built 2019 to now that are not using premiums are usually for couples or they're luxury units. So there's not a lot of family housing being built. And that, in talking to the nonprofit developers, sometimes was one of the frustrations was that families aren't necessarily looking to live in the downtown. They might want to live adjacent to the downtown or in neighborhoods where there's more places, where there's yards and parks and that are much more accessible.
Right, but as we do rezoning it for more density, we're going to be losing some of that excess green space that we have from outside downtown. And so that's something asking, because if we're looking towards what the future of Ann Arbor is going to look like, then what happens to people who, even if they were living downtown as they were younger, and now there aren't those, single family homes that you had from before, and they want to be able to have a family, are the units being built accessible for that? And part of it does go into the affordability, like what Arthur was asking with the Walmart clerk, although in this case I would say Target because that's what's downtown. Or even, I had previously looked at what the salary was for, say, a first-year nurse at U Hospital, and what and the salary for that isn't really that high. The same with someone who's teaching in their first couple of years, even when you combine the two, right? And so if you were going to do, was it FAR versus the premium, which one would could attract a family at that salary point?
Okay. I hear what you're saying. So if I can repeat back,
Is it the same answer?
Well, what I'm hearing from you is that there's a concern about a family or 2-income family that's making a teacher, nurse, and would they be able to find housing in the downtown that would be affordable and attractive to them at a stage of life where they have a family?
Right, something where they're going to stay long term, so they're not turned into transient and having to move once they start that family.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Stay long term. Okay, got it. Thank you. That's an excellent point. Anything else? All right. Travis, did you have more to share? Oh, no, Okay. Rosanita, I'm going to assume that you said that.
I'm done. I just noticed my hand was still raised there.
It's hard on Zoom. So, all right, Travis.
Yeah, and I will try to be brief. I know we've been having this conversation for a long time, but we're having a really good conversation, and we don't often get to have these kind of like open-ended brainstorming sessions. So I actually have 2 questions for the group. As somebody who will eventually have to make a decision on this, and Megan, as the facilitator here, feel free to shut me down if you think that they're not helpful to the conversation. So going back to actually Lucy's original, or one of Lucy's comments around the concerns of payment in lieu. I guess, Lucy, maybe this question is for you, but maybe more directed to the body also, is what is the primary concern with the payment in lieu? What is the end goal that you're looking for? Is it more affordable units? Or because I see the benefits of both, right? We hear from, if with a payment in lieu, we can often turn that into more units, but then we're also creating the potential problem of segregating affordable housing from market rate housing if every developer is doing payment in lieu. And so as a policymaker, I would be interested in hearing from all of you kind of what, when we're kind of balancing those priorities, potentially more units, but they're not mixed in with mixed income, or forcing some mixed income. Is there a priority for the body? Really, that's for anyone. And Lucy, also, I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't have an answer for that either. And so just something to think about if anybody wants to chime in. Yeah, Arthur.
I think it's more so for the diversity, because you have older people that the seniors, you have younger people that, you know, want to find a way to live and to stay in the Ann Arbor area, you know, and so you have to try to come up with a way to, and I know this is hard to fathom, to please everyone, because no one can come up with a plan that's going to make everybody happy. But when you start talking about diversity, you know that there's not always the same income levels and for everyone, you know, so you have to try to make the city of Ann Arbor home to everyone that wants to live and be a part of Ann Arbor.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ryan.
I think this is touching on what Julia said earlier about the state level action on inclusionary zoning, which would allow the city to just require a certain percentage of affordable units. I think if we knew that the repeal of the preemption for inclusionary zoning was likely or imminent, then at least in the short term, I as a tenant would feel like, okay, we just need to maximize the number of affordable units in the short term, and eventually we'll have a better solution down the road. Because I am concerned about the segregation issue, but as a long-term solution, I think the more we would leave the pay in lieu of doing affordable. I'm sorry, it's pay in lieu of building affordable housing units, right?
Building and managing the affordable housing unit.
Building and manage.
Yeah,
right.
So, and to be clear, they're not just buying out of it; they're paying into the affordable housing fund.
Into the right. Which would add on top of the millage money. So I as a long-term solution, I think it's not satisfactory, right? Because the longer we let that go on, the more segregated the city would get in terms of income. And that's not good. But it's just short-term, just because of the severity of the crisis, I feel like I would be supportive of it if we knew that a better long-term solution was coming.
Lucy.
Yeah, I don't have as good of a sense of this as I want, but my thinking is that I'm not sure if this is true. If there's developers who are already building downtown or wherever, and they have a timeline for where they want to build because they're motivated by getting that done and renting out those units, then those affordable, it's kind of the opposite of what Zachariah is saying. I'm thinking like affordable units will be created more quickly if they don't if the affordable housing units are on the back of the developer, because I'm pretty sure that the all affordable housing units that are done by the nonprofit developers, this is kind of what Robert was saying, it's a lot harder for them to get those projects off the ground, and so it ends up taking a long time to build more affordable housing, which is why I feel like it's a problem if developers choose or if they're consistently and always choosing the option of paying in lieu instead of making space for more affordable housing units. And it's my suspicion that that it's the preference of developers to do that because it's easier on them not to have affordable housing units. Because when I read the reports of here are all these new building projects, and then the teeny tiny number of them that are affordable is a problem. It's a problem for diversity, and it's a problem for making space downtown for affordable housing. And yeah, I mean, those are the buildings that are being built quickly and you have to make sure that many more of those units are affordable. I feel like the in lieu gets in the way of that. Could be wrong though. I'm just spelling out the logic. I haven't studied this or anything. I'd like to learn more about it.
And Rosnita.
Listen, I've been gone from Ann Arbor for a long time, but I was living in California and in DC. And there, the experience is that it takes it's more expensive to build there, but it takes quite a few years for the city, to get enough, or the housing authority, I should say, to get enough money in the payment in lieu or the pilot in order to be able to then build that affordable housing complex. I assume it doesn't take quite as long as there, but with here, because it is the cost per square foot to build just isn't as much. However, just out of curiosity, how long does it take to fill the coffers enough to be able to build that next complex for the city, minus the millage and the potential bonds that you guys are passing or could pass?
I can give a very brief answer, although at some point Jennifer Hall might be the best person to answer that. But ultimately, I mean, so financing is absolutely one of the challenges, and we have projects right now that were actually slated for approval that, because of the high cost of construction, they're getting delayed, and because the cost per square foot was just astronomical, and so we are running into that challenge. One of the benefits of having the dollars in the affordable housing coffers is that Jennifer has said to us before that one of the things that the Housing Commission can do is take every $1 that a private developer would spend and probably turn it into $3 from matching from private funding sources, and also federal and state grants that she can take advantage of that they couldn't take advantage of. And so we can generally generally, as a rule, I say that we can kind of triple the investment in affordable housing with a payment in lieu, but it does create some of those other challenges. And so thank you to everyone for the feedback on that. And then Megan, if you'll bear with me, I have one more question for them, but I think maybe this is more directed to what you're getting at.
Well, I did.
But
do you know, like, kind of a rough estimate for how long it takes with that?
It depends on the size of the project. Right. So like some of our projects are much smaller than others, and so it would take a significantly smaller pool of money. And then also right now, because because the construction costs are so high, it's taking a lot more money than it did a year or two ago.
But it's still several years though, right?
Yeah. And for any developer, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, usually from beginning to end, it's a 5 to 7 year project. So from when they have the idea and have an option on the land to when they've either totally had that housing up and rented, or they've totally sold all the units out of it.
When does the city, I guess, get that, or the housing authority get that payment then from them in that process? Is it like when the project's approved, increments along the way?
I believe they get it when they when they're first looking to get building permits. So they have to put that in, and so when they're first starting to break ground or things like that, and that can be typically, I think that's a year after they've gotten their approvals, and some their approvals at Planning Commission and City Council.
So if the city wanted to use the pilot money to build like a 100 unit complex, then roughly like how long does it take to build the coffers for that?
It depends on how much money is coming in from other payments, how much money is coming in from the millage, and the millage. I mean, I don't have the answer, and I think that would be a hard thing to figure out with the millage because we don't have good data. You just went through a pandemic, which really affected the rate of building. I can see is your question, it's part of your question dealing with time, is that
it's just time, because even if you take, the dollar out to make it worth $3 each time, it still takes a long time when you have to do it that way, correct?
It still takes some time. You're going to see the affordable housing millage build funds in that affordable housing fund. And then from the moment you got that dollar to the city, let's say somebody paid in lieu, that it depends. The city could already have a project that they're looking to do that they can immediately put those funds into. And but they're probably planning, that will probably affect their plans 5 years down the road in terms of, can I look for more property? Can we do this? Can we do that? And some of it also is staff and managing too, because you have to manage permits and things like that. And so the more housing you build, the more housing you have to manage as well.
So does the payment in lieu really make that much of a difference if we have the affordable housing mileage or if we had bonds?
So the millage is something the city could borrow against. And the in lieu, the analogy I would make is if you think of the in lieu payments as bonuses. Those are funds that you're not expecting or banking on along the way to come into your affordable housing fund. And there might be an opportunity cost in terms of a developer might choose not to build as many units and their financiers might say, we are uncomfortable with you managing 20% of the units as affordable. So we're going to pull our financing. Whereas the financer might be more comfortable with 100% in lieu because they can just put that in, and that's something that they can put in their calculations and be done with.
Right.
So, all right.
And sorry, then this will be a really quick one, I promise. So the other reason that we're doing, so this is the second time that I've seen this presentation, and Megan, thank you, because I know one of your partners did Energy Commission. This is really helpful. One of the reasons we're going to all these commissions, I believe, is because as you saw from that one of those original slides, there were a lot of priorities that we were trying to incentivize with premiums. One of the things that I'm personally encouraged by right now is that I'm not hearing anyone talk about that, we should be incentivizing more parking spaces, using land for parking spaces. But one of the questions that I think we're trying to get at from going to all these commissions is, what are the priorities from all of these different interest groups around the city, all of these different constituencies? And I think what I'm hearing pretty loud and clear at this table is that affordability and affordable housing is the top priority. But I know that, we have a number of other priorities for the city as well. And so, sustainability is one of those things. And so to the extent around, I think I'm hearing maybe consensus around this group really wants us to utilize premiums, a small menu of premiums, to impact affordability.
I'm seeing some nods, and Julia, and then after Julia, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, because you guys have gone over 2 hours. I don't know how long you usually go.
I would just like to add to that, Travis, is that I do feel that affordability is easier with density, and with density, you will have a reduced carbon footage. No question. It's cheaper to heat an apartment than it is a single family house. It's cheaper if you can walk to the co-op instead of having to drive there.
All right.
Kristen, I know this is going to pass it off to you. Yeah.
I will reach out to Jennifer Hall with the Housing Commission and see if we can set up another kind of education meeting. Last year, I think kind of in the fall, or maybe it was late summer, there was a really small group of renters commissioners attended a presentation. I think it would be helpful to get something like that again, especially now that we have, I think since then, 6 or more new members. So I'll reach out so we can get some just like affordability process questions answered. And then also thank you to Megan. This was a fantastic presentation. Really answered the group's questions thoroughly. So thanks.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you all for spending part of your evening with me. I know your time is valuable, and I really appreciate your time and your input.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that was a great presentation. I know we're going kind of late. Let's see. Moving on to the next point of business, which is 7-C, the Tenant Education Committee Engagement Event presentation. Now, I know it's very late. One second. I apologize. Yeah, so the Senate Education Committee presentation, and I was wondering, do you all feel that we should go forward with that presentation tonight, or should we postpone it again? It was already postponed once. It's running so late.
I guess I'd be inclined to postpone if the others are on board with that.
Is it time sensitive at all? I guess that would be my question before answering.
Jimmy, no? Okay.
No, not time sensitive. I would just say if anyone has a chance to kind of look through the slides, and especially for our new commissioners, if you have any interest in like joining us for further conversation. I know it's hard when you haven't gotten the full background, but we would definitely welcome you to attend our education committee meeting. And we can give you more information about that too.
I just put in my time slot, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie, for organizing that. I think that would be best. So what's the procedure for once we already have adopted an agenda for amending it?
You can move to postpone the item. Motion, postpone, second, and then vote. And then if you say to the July meeting, then it will go to the July meeting. If you say a future meeting, then it can be a discussion later about when to place it. But I think the July meeting should be fine.
Okay. Do we have a motion to postpone that item?
I'll motion.
Okay, motion by Patrick to postpone to our next meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Lucy. All those in favor of postponing item 7-C to our next meeting, which is the July meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Okay, with that, it is postponed. And we can move on to our next item, which is, I believe, 8. Let me check on the agenda really quickly here. Yeah, so 8-A, reports from commissioners, committees, and or work groups. So let's see. We can begin with commissioners. So are there any commissioners who would like to offer a report to share with the commission? This could be any, an important event that you were able to attend, something that you were made aware of recently that pertains to the business of the commission. Just raise your hand if you have anything to share.
Whoa.
Oh, Arthur, go ahead. I didn't see your hand.
Oh, I just put it up. I just have a quick question. I was speaking with the Fair Housing Group, and they was telling me about the tester program that they have set up where they sent in potential renters to see if they're going to be denied. And I told them at the time that I would be interested in doing that. Now that I'm a member of this committee, would that be any type of conflict to be doing undercover, secret undercover duty of trying to find out whether renters are going to actually turn me down, or would that be a conflict?
I don't believe so. However, I think that you might want to discuss this offline just because of the nature of what you might be doing.
Oh, I might have gave myself away.
Yeah, well, yeah, don't worry about it, but let's go ahead, John.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe talking to John Reiser offline. He's on right now, but John is the attorney for our commission, so he might be able to best answer that around a conflict.
Okay, well, everybody else that heard it, just void I said that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Arthur. So briefly, I have a few things to share. First of all, we do have a few different committees under the Renters Commission. I unfortunately didn't write out a list here, but one of them is tenant education. One of them discusses enforcement. And we're discussing how the city enforces rental laws. In particular, we've been focusing on right to renew and the early leasing ordinance. However, that could change. And I don't think there's a regularly meeting committee outside of that, but I could be wrong. Anyway, as we plan these meetings, we'll extend the invitation to all the commissioners. So if you'd like to get involved in any of these side projects going on, that you are more than welcome to, and we'd love to have you. On top of that, as new commissioners, I think there's an orientation happening. The information was sent out Thursday. Is it the 29th of June? I can't remember.
Yes.
Anyway, it was either 29th of June. Great. So Kristen, you emailed that out to everybody. I would encourage everyone to attend, whether you're brand new or not. There's a few other things that I would encourage you all to check out, including the bylaws of the commission, the Open Meetings Act, a description of the Open Meetings Act of Michigan. We can send those documents out if that hasn't been sent out to everybody. There's certain things that we have to do as members of this commission. We can't be making decisions behind closed doors or having discussions with the entire commission behind closed doors. We have to be very open about it, hence the Open Meetings Act. We'll get all that information out to you. And then just a quick report from me. I was able to attend the meeting of the Detroit Tenants Association. It looks like they are pushing to pass a version of right to renew for the city of Detroit because of some issues they've run into. That's exciting. And I think that there's going to be opportunity to collaborate with them on that, as well as this issue of right to counsel, which would guarantee tenants the right to have legal counsel in the landlord-tenant court. So the very interesting things, if you're interested in either of those, let me know. There's plenty of interesting housing events that I'll be sharing with everybody. That's all from me, though.
Okay.
Any other reports? Okay. So we can move on to 8-B report from HHSAB liaison. We don't have one at the moment. That's a liaison from HHSAB to us. Then 8-C report from staff. Kristen?
I have a couple reports. First was that Zachariah mentioned the training coming up in a couple of weeks. The clerk's office is putting that on. Definitely highly recommend you attend. If you're not able to attend, it will be recorded though, so you'd be able to watch it later. But you missed out on the question asking. So I think that would be really great to do. I'll also send out information on the Open Meetings Act that Zachariah mentioned. Another update, let's see. City Council passed a resolution earlier this month that allows boards and commissions that have been deemed electronic only. The Renters Commission is one of those. And you previously weren't permitted to meet in person. Now, you could meet up to 4 times per year, and it would just have to be by vote. So you have to vote to schedule an in-person meeting up to 4 times. So wanted to make you all aware of that, since that's something you've really expressed a lot of interest in the past. The main update.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Lucy, did I see your hand go up?
No.
Okay, no worries. It's mistaken there. So we can move on to item 9, which is our second public comment session. Kristen, mind leading that? Oh, you know what? I see Arthur's hand up. Go ahead, Arthur.
I just have one quick question. Is there something wrong with Kristen's microphone? Because she's the only one that I have problems hearing. It breaks up.
You were a little quiet and breaking up there, Kristen.
Oh, I apologize. What was I able to the gist of my update was that previously this group could only meet electronically, but now you can meet up to 4 times per year, and you would just have to vote in order to do that. So there's some other logistics that we'll have to consider if you want to do a live in-person meeting. We'll have to consider room availability, whether or not staff is available to televise, things like that. But it's kind of a new option available to this group that wasn't previously available.
All right. Thank you for clarifying. So item, and if you don't understand a comment that's made because of digital issues or otherwise, just ask exactly like you did, Arthur. Thanks. So item 9, second general public comments. Kristen, would you like to lead that?
Yeah. Public comment can be made by phone at 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and entering meeting ID 935-8080-1941. Or to join the Zoom meeting, you can go to a2gov.org/Renters Commission meeting. And if you are joining in the Renters Commission meeting with the Zoom link, you can press, or you can use the raise hand feature to indicate that you'd like to be called on. If you are calling the number and entering the meeting ID, you can press *9 to raise your hand. So let's see, we have, if anyone watching would like to address the Renters Commission, go ahead and raise your hand now. All right, no attendees have indicated.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen. With that, we can move on to our last item before adjournment, which is communications. We have 4 different communications here before us. So we'll start with the People Friendly Streets Outcomes Report. Let me quickly share my screen here. And let me know if anyone has a hard time accessing these attachments in the future, just send me an email and I can explain. So this is from the DDA and the city. Is there any specific feedback that they're looking from us, to hear from us?
It was just forwarded to me to share with the group some of the outcomes from this. Planning staff shared it.
Okay. Gotcha. Are there any comments, questions, discussion about this? Okay.
I think it's fine that we read through this on our own time.
Great.
Yeah. For the new folks and maybe those of us that aren't so new, where can we find this again?
So you can, go ahead.
Oh, it's linked on the agenda that gets sent out. So next to every agenda item, there's a blue file number that is underlined. If you click it, it will bring you to where the city has all of the links or attachments included under different items on the agenda.
Yeah, it's right here. If you click that, it'll bring you to a website, as Kristen said, with all the links. Okay. Let's see. Let's move on to the next attachment, which is an informational sheet talking about the recent amendment to the housing code to require to require carbon monoxide detectors in all rental units. So this is something that we had talked to Councilmember Cornell about, and this was passed by City Council. So it's been implemented, and this contains some information, I think, to be shared with landlords so that they can come up to code. So are there any comments, questions about this? Okay. I think it's a good example for how to inform people after a law change has occurred. The issue is just making sure that the target audience gets them. Yeah. We'll move on to, we had 2 emails regarding Courthouse Square. Any questions, discussion about these? Okay, so I think that
Wait, I
with
have
the
a question.
situation at court.
I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask if Kristen, had you been in touch with those people, and like, are they expecting the Renters Commission to do anything, or was this to inform us of their...
I believe it was to inform. I corresponded briefly with the person with information on how to contact Janet, and a little bit of back and forth to that effect. I believe that this was the sender's kind of request for compliance. I'm not sure it's reached the complaint stage yet. Maybe it has now, since that's from last month. It's been a long time since they've requested. So I can check in with John and Janet tomorrow and see if there's been anything that's been going on.
Thanks, appreciate that. That would be great.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so we can move on to our next item, item 11, which is adjournment, the end of our meeting. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Motion by Arthur. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Patrick. All right. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Okay, with that, we have adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to contact me anytime. And I look forward to working with everybody on all these issues.